This is the video for Math 8, Section 3-10, Day 2, solving system algebraically by multiplying and then using the elimination method. What you want to look for is you want to look for the opposite of the non-one number and then multiply that number. You're trying to create opposites. Remember, opposites are like a 2 and a -2. Or a 4 and a -4, or a 5 and a -5. So you're going to want to multiply one of the equations by a number to create opposite letters. You're going to try and create a 2x and a -2x, a 3y and a -3y. Therefore, you can use the method from yesterday where you have opposites so that you can just add going down and those letters will cancel out. So if you take a look at always look for the 1. Now, where you're going to find the 1 is this might be just an X. Remember that when there's a letter in front of, when there's a letter all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of it. So this is really -8x and 1x. The opposite of -8 is +8. To create a +8x here, I need to multiply this whole bottom thing by 8. So 8 times 1x equals 8x. We're trying to create those opposites. Now we have opposites because now we have a -8 and we have a +8x. So if you take a look at the second one, we have a 10. The opposite of 10 is -10. So -10 times 1 is -10. Now we have our opposites. And remember, you're going to have letters in back of them. This might be a y and a y. So you're creating a 10y and a -10y. The opposite of 2 is -2. So to get a -2 here, I need to multiply that 1 by -2. The opposite of -6 is +6. So I want to multiply by 6. Notice that sometimes it's going to be on the top, like the -2, but sometimes it's going to be on the bottom as well. The opposite of -2 is +2. Whoops, we don't want to do that. The opposite of -2 is +2, so I want to multiply by +2. The opposite of -5 is +5, so I want to multiply by 5. The opposite of 4 is -4, so I want to multiply by -4 here. And again, all that we're trying to do is create opposites. The opposite of 5 is -5, so I want to multiply this one by -5. And again, remember, you're trying to create opposites. This might be a 2x and a -2x. This might be a -5y and a +5y. So you're going to go through a step-by-step process, all right? You're going to multiply all of the terms by a number to get an opposite term. That way you'll have your opposites, so you'll add going down, and those opposites will cancel out. You're going to solve that one-step equation, take that answer, sub it in, and it's all the same steps as yesterday, and then do your check at the end. Remember, you're getting answers of x equals a number and y equals a number. When you multiply, notice how I was putting those numbers outside the parentheses. You're going to have things like this. The most important thing, the single part that people mess up the most, is forgetting to distribute. Now, there's really a 1 in front of that x, because anytime a letter is all by itself, there's really a 1 in front of it. If I had to multiply by 2, because I want to try and create a 2x, you have to take the number outside the parentheses and distribute, and distribute. You have to multiply all 3 terms by that number. So 2 times 1x is 2x, 2 times 3y is 6y, 2 times 5 is 10. So when I distribute, I have to do it to all 3 terms. The single biggest mistake that people make is forgetting it to multiply by the y and by the 5 there. So take a look at this first one. So I see right away that I have a 1x and I have a 5x. The opposite of 5 is -5. So I want to take this whole bottom equation and multiply it by -5 because I'm trying to create a 5x and a -5x. I'm trying to create those opposites. So now I want to distribute, and distribute. All right. When I do that, I'm just going to bring down my first equation. I didn't touch that top equation, so I'm just going to rewrite that top equation.
Negative 5 times 1x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, but when I write it, I'm going to write minus 20. Negative 5 times 5 is negative 25. That was step number 1. I multiplied to create my opposites. Now what I want to do is I have my opposites, all right? I have my opposites right here. I have a negative 5 and I have a positive 5. So what I want to do in step number 2 is add going down. All right, we're going to add going down here. Let me just label this with 2. When I add going down, these 5s cancel out. 2y plus negative 20y is negative 18y. 7 plus negative 25 is negative 18. Now I just have a one-step equation. Step number 3 says solve that one-step equation. So I'm going to divide by negative 18, divide by negative 18, and I get y equals 1. That's one of my 2 answers. Now that I have my y answer, now I need to solve for my x answer. You can take this y equals 1. You could sub it into here or here for y. It doesn't matter which one you sub it into. I'm going to tell you, though, that this bottom equation with the 1x is always going to be the easier one, the one with the 1x. So I'm going to sub it into that bottom equation. So I'm going to rewrite the equation. I have x plus 4y equals 5. And if you want to put the 1 in front of the x, that's fine. And now I'm going to sub in this 1 in for the y right here. So instead of having 1x plus 4y, I have 1x plus 4 times 1 equals 5. That is step number 4. Step number 5 says solve that equation. So now I'm just going to solve the equation. I can do 4 times 1 is 4. So I have 1x plus 4 equals 5. Solve that 2-step equation. So minus 4 minus 4. So I have 1x equals 1. Divide by 1, divide by 1, and you get an answer of x equals 1. This is just a coincidence that x equals 1 and y equals 1. They're not always going to be the same number. So now I'm going to do step number 6, which is my last step, which is my check. I'm checking the point 1, 1. Remember, all points are written x, y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sub these numbers into our 2 original equations. All right, I'm just going to draw a line down the middle to separate them. And now I'm going to sub those numbers in. So instead of 5 times x, I have 5 times 1. Instead of 2 times y, I have 2 times 1. So 5 times 1 is 5. 2 times 1 is 2. 5 plus 2 is 7. So 7 equals 7. It checks. Subbing it into the other equation, instead of x plus 4y, I have 1 plus 4 times 1 equals 5. 4 times 1 is 4, so I have 1 plus 4 equals 5. 1 plus 4 is 5, so 5 equals 5. It checks. Remember that it has to check in both equations for it to be the correct answer. If it only checks in one but doesn't check in the other, it is not the correct answer. If it doesn't check in either one, it's not the correct answer. So my 2 final answers here are x equals 1 and y equals 1. Let's take a look at the next one. In the next one, we want to try to create opposites. Remember, there's really a 1x here. Always look to create an opposite of that 1x. We have a negative 5x. So I'm going to try and create a 5x on the top. Remember, you have to multiply that whole entire top equation by whatever number you're multiplying. So I need to distribute, distribute, and distribute. So in step number 1, I have 5 times 1x, which is 5x, 5 times 3y, which is 15y, 5 times 1, which is 5. I'm just going to bring down that second equation because I didn't use it yet. That is step number 1. Step number 2, now that I have my opposites, I have a 5x and a negative 5x. Now that I have my opposites, step number 2 says add going down. When I add going down, those x's will cancel out. 15y plus 4y is 19y. 5 plus negative 24 is negative 19. Step number 3 says solve that equation. So when I go to solve this one-step equation, this says 19 times y. I want to divide by 19 and divide by 19. So I get an answer of y equals -1. That's one of my two answers, because remember, I'm looking for x and I'm looking for y. Now that I have my y equals answer, I can take this -1 and I can sub it into here or here for y. The easier equation is always the one with the 1, the letter all by itself. So I'm going to sub it into that top equation. So my top equation says 1x plus 3y equals 1. I'm going to take that -1 and sub it in for y. So I'm going to take, and I'm going to have 1x, I'm going to have 1x plus 3 times -1 equals 1. 3 times -1 in step number 5. Now I need to solve that equation for step number 5. 3 times -1 is -3. So I have 1x minus 3 equals 1. Add 3, add 3. So 1x equals 3. Divide by 1, divide by 1. 3 divided by 1 is 3. So I get a final answer of x equals 3. Whoops. Sorry, I messed that up. 1 plus 3 is 4. Sorry, 1 plus 3 is 4. So I get a final answer of x equals 4. Sorry about that. Now we got to do our check. When we do our check in step number 6, we are checking the point 4, comma, -1. X equals 4, y equals -1. I'm going to sub that into both of my original equations. So when I go to sub them in, I'm going to have, instead of x plus 3y, I'm going to have 4 plus 3 times -1 equals 1. 3 times -1 is -3, so I have 4 minus 3 equals 1. 1 equals 1, it checks. Instead of 5x plus 4, -5x plus 4y, I have -5 times 4 plus 4 times -1, and that equals -24. So -5 times 4 is -20, minus 4 equals -24. That is -24. So -24 equals -24. It checks. So my two answers for this one were x equals 4 and y equals -1. The boxes tend to get a little repetitive after a while. So if you don't want to put the boxes, don't worry about what goes in what box. As long as you're solving it correctly and doing all the steps, that's the most important part. So when we take a look at this third example, there's really a 1 in front of the y. I want to create opposites with my y's this time. The opposite of 2y is -2y. So I'm going to multiply this whole bottom equation by -2 because I'm trying to create a 2y and a -2y. Distribute, distribute, distribute. I'm just going to rewrite that top equation because I didn't touch it yet. -2 times 3x is -6x. -2 times 1y is -2y. -2 times 9 is -18. Again, if you don't like the boxes, you don't have to put the boxes. I'm going to do it just for the notes here. So now we have our opposites. We have our opposites of 2y and -2y, which is what we want. Now, all that you have to do is add going down for step number 2, and those 2y and -2y will cancel out. 5x plus -6x is -1x. 16 plus -18 is -2. Step number 3 says solve that one-step equation. All right, so I'm going to solve this one-step equation now by dividing by -1, dividing by -1. And you get x equals +2. Step number 4. Step number 4 says take your answer. We got x equals 2 and sub it into the x spot. Make sure that you're always subbing it into the correct letter. In the previous problem, we subbed it into the y spot, but now you have your x. We need to sub x into the x spot. Again, we want to use the equation that has the 1 in it. All right, so we want to use that bottom equation this time. All right, so we're going to use 3x plus 1y equals 9. We want to take this positive 2 for our x and sub it into the x spot. So what I'm going to have is 3 times 2 plus 1y equals 9. Step number 5 says solve that equation. So when I go to solve this equation, I'm going to do 3 times 2 first, which is 6, plus 1y equals 9, minus 6 minus 6. So I have 1y equals 3, divide by 1, and you get y equals 3. So my two answers are x equals 2 and y equals 3. Now we're going to do our check. We are going to check the point 2, 3. Because x is 2 and y is 3. That's what we found. So I'm going to take and sub those numbers into my equations where they belong. Give me a second to rewrite them. So subbing them in. Instead of 5 times x, I have 5 times 2. Instead of 2 times y, I have 2 times 3 equals 16. 10 plus 6 equals 16. 16 equals 16. It checks. 3 times 2 instead of 3 times x plus 3 instead of plus y equals 9. 6 plus 3 equals 9. 9 equals 9. It checks. Both of my answers check, so I know that my answer is 2 and 3. Let's try it without using the boxes, all right? The boxes become very in the way after a while. Let's try and do one without the boxes. So my first step is I'm going to put a 1 in front of my y. I'm trying to create opposites with my y's because that's where the 1 is. The opposite of -2 is +2. To get a +2 down here, I need to distribute with that 2 because I want to create a -2y and a +2y. I didn't touch that top equation, so all I'm going to do is rewrite it. That bottom equation, distribute. So 2 times 2x is 4x plus 2y equals 12. My second step says to take those numbers and add them going down. We have our opposites right now. Those opposites are going to cancel out. So when I add going down, I'm going to have 8x equals 16. Solve that one-step equation. So divide by 8. We get x equals 2. We now want to take that x equals 2 and sub it into the x spot. I think the easier equation is the one with the 1. So that's the one that I'm going to sub it into. So I'm going to sub it into 2x plus 1y equals 6. I'm going to take that 2 and sub it in for x. So 2 times 2 plus 1y equals 6. 4 plus 1y equals 6. -4, solving that two-step equation. So I have 1y equals 2. Divide by 1, and you get y equals 2. So my two answers are, what did I do here? Did I screw this one up? Oh, no. X equals 2 and y equals 2. So now I'm going to do my check. I am checking 2 and 2. So x and y. When I go to do it, I'm going to sub them into my original equations. So 4 times 2 minus 2 times 2 equals 4. This would be 8 minus 4 equals 4. 4 equals 4. It checks. 2 times 2 plus 2 equals 6. This would be 4 plus 2 equals 6. 6 equals 6. It checked. Both of them check so that I know my two answers are 2 and 2. In the next example, again, we're trying to create opposites. The opposite of -2x is positive 2x. So I want to multiply this bottom equation by 2. Take and distribute. I didn't touch that top equation, so I'm just going to rewrite it. Now I'm going to distribute. 2 times 1x is 2x. 2 times 7y is 14y. 2 times 4 is 8. Now I have my opposites. I have my opposites right here. I have my negative 2x and my 2x, which is what I wanted. So now I want to add going down, and those x's will cancel out. So now I have 19y equals 19. Divide by 19, divide by 19, and I get y equals 1. Now that I have y equals 1, I can take and sub that 1, y equals 1, into here or here. All right, I think that second equation is a little bit easier. So I'm going to sub it into x plus 7y equals 4, or 1x, if I want to put the 1 there. So 1x plus 7 times 1 when I go to sub it in. Equals 4. 7 times 1 is 7. So 1x plus 7 equals 4. Minus 7 minus 7. So I have 1x equals negative 3. Divide by 1, and I get x equals negative 3. So my final answer is negative 3 and positive 1. So now I'm going to do a check with negative 3 and positive 1. I'm going to rewrite my original equations and sub them in. When I go to sub them in, I have negative 2 times negative 3 plus 5 times 1. So I have 6 plus 5 when I multiply, 11 equals 11 when I add, and that checks. I have negative 3 plus 7 times 1. 7 times 1 is 7. And negative 3 plus 7 is 4, so 4 equals 4. It checks. Let's do one more. Again, there's a 1 in front of that y. I want to create opposites with those. So the opposite of 4 is negative 4. I'm going to take this top equation and multiply by negative 4. Distribute, distribute, distribute. So I have negative 20x minus 4y. Negative 9 times negative 4 times 19 is negative 76. I didn't touch that bottom equation, so I just want to rewrite it. Now I have my opposites, because now I have my negative 4 and my positive 4. So all that I want to do next is just add going down, and those will cancel out, because now it's a problem just like yesterday. So negative 20 plus negative 2 is negative 22. Negative 76 plus 10 is negative 66. Solve that one-step equation, so divide by negative 22s, and you get x equals 3. Now that I have my one answer, now I can take my x equals 3 and I can sub it in for x and sub it in for x. I think the equation that has the 1 in it is always the easier one. So 5x plus 1y equals 19. I'm going to take this 3 and sub it in for x. So 5 times 3 plus 1y equals 19. I have 15 plus 1y equals 19. Try and get the letter all by itself. So minus 15 minus 15. 1y equals 4. Divide by 1, and I get an answer of y equals 4. Go to do my check. Whoops. We want to check the point 3, 4. So x is 3 and y is 4. I'm going to rewrite my original questions. And I'm going to sub in my answers. So 5 times 3 is 15. Add together the 15 and 4 to be 19. So that one checks. Negative 2 times 3 plus 4 times 4. When you sub it in, I have negative 6 plus 16. That is 10. So 10 equals 10, and it checks. Again, the single biggest mistake that people make. First of all, we want to create opposites. All right. Always create opposites with your 1. Don't forget, you need to distribute, distribute, distribute. Also make sure that when you sub things in, you sub it into the correct spot. Make sure that you sub in an x
into the X spot, a Y into the Y spot.